Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me tonight is my new friend. This is one of hopefully multiple episodes Kyle is going to do with me. Kyle was one of the other people that went to the Kickstarter for the Tramps Like Us film and picked at a tier where he got to be a guest on Set Listing Bruce. Kyle, thank you so much for your generosity and welcome to the show.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure to be here. Let's talk some Bruce.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to be here.
That sounds great. I always like to start at the beginning. So talk a little bit, where did you grow up and what kind of music did you listen to when you were growing up?
So I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in northern New Jersey, and I had some older siblings. And gosh, I remember it as far as Bruce goes anyway. Prior to Bruce, my dad was a lot towards old time 50s music and a lot of Motown stuff. And I loved it, and I still love it. And my mom was a little bit more country, but specifically, you can remember it. I was 8 years old, and we were at this like family party at a pool party, and Hungry Heart came on. And I just remember all the older siblings and the kids their age singing the song like loud. I was like, wow, that's fun. I didn't know, but then that whole song sucked me in. I didn't know who Bruce was. They had been obviously listening to him, and I guess that was like the early '80s, maybe 1980 even, like early '80s. And I just remember hearing "Hungry Heart," and I was like, "That's different. It's different than Motown. It's different than country." But the fact that it was like it energized, and seeing the older kids singing the song, obviously I wanted to keep hearing that song over and over again. And then a few years later was the big time for Bruce when I was in fourth or fifth grade, and then Born in the USA came out. And specifically, I could just remember that's when about the age where you start coming into the music you like, and I liked some of that early '80s pop music and what was happening, but it wasn't just the music. It was a lot of the music. When Born in the USA came out, it was like you had break dancers and you had the people with skinny ties and the loud and suits and things like that. And don't get me wrong, I actually did some break dancing in my day, but like
No
the
way.
style of Bruce was just it was pretty good too. Actually, I used to compete.
Nice. Uh-huh.
And but it was that working class style of his that pulled me in. The t-shirts and the jeans, the roaring voice. And then I was also right at that age when he pulled up Courtney Cox onto the stage where I was like, damn, there's women like that in the world? And and so that was it for the whole Dancing in the Dark and Born in the USA, and those songs really hit me. Glory Days. And even at that point, I really didn't know. I didn't know that he had already written these little stories and these more or less little films on the Born to Run album and the Greetings album. And especially, he wrote these little stories that just really spoke to me and still do to this day. The Darkness on the Edge of Town stuff got me through some of the hardest times in my life. I didn't know when I first knew of Bruce that he had already written that stuff. And I found him like in fifth grade, right at that time.
One of the things, yeah, I was going to say, one of the things that I think sometimes long-term fans forget is what a gateway album Born in the USA was, right? And I know there's fans that have heard it so much and it's overplayed, but that is where a lot of people found Bruce, that he was on the radio, he was everywhere. And then a lot of us then took that to explore and find his earlier music and find that. You shared a little bit that the story spoke to you. What was your next step when you found out and you wanted to hear that? Did you go back and start looking at other albums and his previous things? Is that what you were doing?
Oh, absolutely. Probably right after he was getting big like that. and it was probably straight on to Born to Run album and the storytelling. Like even as a younger kid, it was a secret. It was a secret to everybody that knew me back then. But I would write little stories in secret, throw them out. No one ever saw them. But even as a kid that age, I was able to hear the stories he was telling in those songs. It's like Jungle Land. That's a movie. That's
Yeah.
not just a song. And there's not many, if any. There's some, but there's not many songwriters that can write the imagery he does. And as I get older, now I know it's like he puts himself in that place in that moment. It's like any kind of art form, and he's as good at it as anybody.
Yeah.
We can get more into, especially when he years later when he wrote The Rising, and
Yeah.
I'm a firefighter, and he wrote that song like he was one of us. Like he knew the feeling of going up those stairs with a 60-pound stone and a mile of line and
Yeah.
all that. Like not many songwriters can put themselves in shoes the way he does.
Yeah, absolutely. I
And
agree.
it seems like the shoes always fit.
Yeah. Did so I always like to preface this with the amount of times you've seen Bruce perform live is a bad barometer of how big of a fan you are. There's plenty of people that have not had a chance to see him, and then there's other people, right, because of their age and where they live, may have seen him hundreds of times. So, are you someone who counts? And if you are, how many?
Okay, there's a lot going on with that question, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I've been very blessed and very lucky. I can't say I've seen him hundreds of times, but I'm I don't number no, but I'm pretty sure I'm into the 60s by this point.
Okay.
Some of my favorite times has been bringing somebody that either doesn't really care for Bruce or had never had an opportunity to see Bruce, and I've had that opportunity on several occasions over the years, and it transforms people. Like if they weren't real Bruce fans before, I could tell you they are now, just by the energy he brings to his shows.
Yeah.
And that's it's actually a great thrill of mine
Talk to me a little
to
bit
do that.
about that. Yeah. Talk to me about some of the people you've brought in and tell me some of the shows you've gone to, Kyle.
All right, I'll get back to my first show. That was when I was 12 years old. But
Nice.
that was, but then I graduated high school in 1992, and he had just come out with the Human Touch Lucky Town tour, and he
Yeah.
played 10 shows at the Meadowlands that summer, right before we were going to college.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to see a pretty good handful of the 10 shows back when you can afford it. And but what was really awesome about that was those were I had seen him a couple times, and then those were the shows where my buddies came with me, my guys from high school that are all huge fans. Also, I think that's partially because of me, maybe not, but I remember that those were some of the best ones because that summer we would just go there, tailgate, and we're 18, 19-year-old kids, and that was just a fun time. And we were going to start separating, going separate ways. Everybody was going to college in different places, and we're still all close and friendly, and we talk actually every day. And there's a few of us that will just randomly text Bruce lyrics to one another, and we'll know what the other guy's like, what's happening in his life just by that. And then right when I got to college, I guess it would have been the same tour. I went to college out in Nebraska, and there's this guy Joel that I played football with out there, and he was this big monster lumberjack looking farmer dude with a big beard. And when we first met, he was older than me. He was a senior, I was a freshman, but he wasn't too many guys from New Jersey. And one of the first seasons, I don't know much about New Jersey, but I know I like Bruce Springsteen. So later on that year, Bruce came out. He played in Iowa, which was like a couple hour, 2 or 3 hour drive. And we actually drove out, and I brought Joel to his first Bruce show. And that was pretty awesome. Another guy, I was working in Ohio in my 20s, and we went to Cleveland, this guy I was working with at the time, and he was all country and nothing else. But he left there a Bruce fan. And then in recent years, in 2016, a guy I worked with on the fire department, this real big, it looked like he was Mike Clarence, like this big,
Okay.
dark skinned Puerto Rican guy. And I brought him, and he still talks about it. He's, man, that guy ran around for, at the time, nearly 4 hours. He didn't stop. And he had never seen anything like it. And that was actually in Los Angeles. We flew out to go on vacation. And I was like, while we're there, Bruce is playing. And we got tickets. We ended up first row right behind the stage. So it was great seats. And Danny became a fan. And then in recent years, I have two super close friends, and family friends too, that we almost call cousins. And they're both musicians.
Okay.
And I got to bring those two guys to Bruce, and I would say they have a much bigger appreciation for him now. So that's one of the great thrills is you can hear his songs on the radio, or you can know of the popular songs if you don't know some of the deeper ones. But when you see the guy live, it's just, there's nothing quite like it. There really isn't.
So, a couple things there. I often say two kinds of people: the people that see Bruce the first time and go, wow, that was long. And then the second kind are these ones that say, oh my goodness, when can I do this again? When can I see this again? The other thing you made me smile about is 2016, right? The River Reunion Tour. I took my son to his first show. He drove with me to Oklahoma City, and he had never seen Bruce. He didn't want to know anything in advance. He just wanted to experience it fresh. And so we go to the show, and afterwards, I'm like, do you want to go to a bar? You want to do something? I'm just tired. I think I'm ready to go to bed. Okay. So we drove to bed. So we get up the next morning, and we stopped and got some coffee and breakfast, and we're in the car. And I said, do you mind talking about the show? No, none at all. And he's like, first thing, Dad, you've got to be on your toes because Bruce doesn't stop. He ends one song, and before the other song, the last note, he's counting down the next one. There is no wasted breaths. And you go, yeah. And then he's a huge sports fan, right? He said, secondly, the Cowboys receivers need to catch as good as his guitar guy does. He said, we should draft him for the Cowboys because he did not miss. And I do think, I joke about that, if Bruce even took a couple minutes between songs, they would go 3.5, 4 hours every night, right? But it's just bam. And that's how he loves to perform.
Yeah, it's astonishing. He's doing it still, maybe not 4 hours, but for 3 solid hours. And I've seen him in the last 2 months. I've seen him 3 times. It's just nonstop. And I got lucky enough. I met one of his, this is a good story, actually. I became friendly with one of his main stage guys.
Okay.
We met through a mutual friend, and I actually physically met him when I was out in Ireland. And we got to talking. He goes, I was always a Billy Joel guy. He worked for Billy Joel for years. And he's been working for Bruce since 2012. Like Bruce keeps him on. And but he says, I don't care who you are. You have to appreciate what that guy does every single night. And, you know, that work ethic and that performance just makes fans out of people. And it does it for the guys he's got working for him.
I think that's a great point. And as you talked about, that he gives all. And you and I were talking before we hit record. You were sharing you had gone to a couple of shows over in Ireland, right? And we were talking about that, how much he was getting downpoured and sweating and everything. And we're like, it's a wonder at his age, like hell, at a 30-year-old doesn't get sick, and this much less someone in their 70s that's going 100 miles an hour. You've got to wonder that immune system. So yeah, sending good thoughts to Bruce and hope that he gets better.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I love the idea of you bringing people to shows and sharing that gospel. Talk about the last few songs. Did you see any last year? Did you go to any shows last year?
Like I said, a few weeks before Ireland, I was in Albany, and yeah, I was actually before he got sick the first time and had to cancel for several months. I was actually at that last MetLife show where he
that
just
everyone talked about.
he let
how
it all hang
amazing it
out that
was.
night.
Yes, yeah, he sure did.
And in fact, the one cousin guy that I brought to his first Bruce show after feeding him Bruce since we were little kids, that was his first show. So he got spoiled right off the gate, right out of the gate.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh man! And my closest friend, that one of those guys I text with the lyrics, was with us too, and that was just rocking. Yeah, he let it all out that night for sure.
Yeah.
And I did see him last year too when he first came around with his tour.
Yeah. What was your thoughts on a lot of discussion of last year? He did not change the set list up as much. This year he's doing a little bit more. How were you on that thoughts? Were you a little disappointed last year there wasn't as much change, or you didn't care, or somewhere in the middle?
I would say somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
And I was going to go see him regardless. And in one of the shows I got to see, he switched everything up that last night. But part of the mystique or the allure of the Bruce shows is it's always been, for as long as I can remember, what's he going to fucking surprise us with now? When there's no surprises, you can lose that part of it. But it's only a small part of it.
Right.
Because still the songs he's singing are gonna pull at your heart. They're gonna touch your heart. But so I guess I lean more towards whatever he's in charge, and he is 70 at the time, 2 years old. Maybe he's got to rein it in for himself. Turns out he really didn't. Whatever, plus he was trying out that new stuff with some of the new material. He needed to see how that was going to play out. And so like I said, somewhere in the middle, if you just lost a little bit of the surprise element, which has always been a big part of Bruce. But other than that, he's still going to be running around for a few hours and take you out of, I don't know if it's take you out of or put you into life. Like he's going to put you in a blissful state of being regardless.
Yeah.
And that's what he does.
If you don't mind sharing, talk to me how you decided to be a firefighter.
It's a family business.
Okay.
I had an uncle.
That's often the case.
And my two of my older brothers. And two of my older brothers, who they're both now retired, they started off a lot younger than I did. For lack of a better term, we could actually talk, because Bruce has a little bit, there's part of my story is I basically lost the decade of my 20s, addiction and things like that. Bruce helped pull me out of some of that stuff. But so I got on the job a little bit later, but it turns out that everything turned around for me. And so it was part of the family business, I needed a job. And then once I got there, I realized how much I really love it. And I'm blessed to have the job. I get to go out, I help people every day, and stuff that makes you feel good about yourself.
Yeah. Tell me how you shared. And so if it isn't too personal, tell me how Bruce helped you with your journey to be sober.
All right. So we also said we're going to talk about my first show. So let's start it there, because it's pretty good. So first show I ever see, 1985, my brother Kevin takes me, 12 years old. And I could completely, I'm seeing it in my mind now. We're at the Meadowlands Giant Stadium at the time. And I'll never forget the thunder when he opened up with Born in the USA and seeing hundreds of thousands of arms up in the air. And it was a spiritual experience for me at 12 years old. And then again, those other shows I talked about right after high school, my brother Kevin was part of that. My brother Kevin really introduced me to it. My brother Kevin and I were pretty close. He was older, he's 8 years older. He always included me in things. And right after those shows, and I left for college in Nebraska, my brother Kevin was killed in a construction accident. And that is like a time of, I could go back to and say, where Bruce's music really resonated. And not even so much, it was just there for me. I wanted to be alone. I didn't really want to be around any people, but I always wanted his music playing.
Yeah.
And I would go on long car rides and just listen to songs like The Ties That Bind and No Surrender and Blood Brothers and things like that. And so actually, whatever song, that live 75 to 85 album was huge, that I listened to a lot after that. But no music, I also started to do things to numb the pain that I was feeling. And it turned out I began having a drinking problem. And so in my early 30s, I sobered up, changed my entire life around. And Bruce was there through all of it.
Yeah.
And I would still take those long solo drives, and I'd be listening to Bruce. And now I do things like every summer I take a long road trip across country. And a lot of times I'm listening to Bruce. The one year is pretty cool. I was listening to the XM, East Street Radio.
Yeah, sure.
And I actually called in from the road. I was like in Arizona. And I talked to Dave Marsh and I told him, I'm on the road, just me and my dog. And we had this like 20-minute conversation. And he actually recommended a book to me, Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck. And it was just cool. So Bruce has always just been there. Somehow he's just always been there. And I know you also hear a lot of people talk. You mentioned earlier about how some people say about the Born in the USA album. Yeah. And I just say, like, to those folks, I don't know, did you ever hear the acoustic version of Born in the USA or Dancing in the Dark, when he does that with just an acoustic guitar? And it's a totally different song. And what's just amazing to me is that all these years, he's still relevant. He's still making new music and trying new things, right? This whole Motown album, this last thing, he's doing Night Shift, which is like, pretty awesome.
Yeah, it really is, right? The idea that he's still experimenting and still pushing and still challenging himself, I think is just really impressive. And I would argue that Letter to You, I won't say it's his best album, but it's as good as album as he's put out, right? And I realize that's tough. You're talking Darkness and Born to Run and The Rising and all these other albums. But when you think about that, right, that's amazing. At that age, he's still able to put out that kind of music.
I totally agree. So that album comes out, and within a few days, I'm telling my best friends, like, this song, if I were a priest, is in my top 5 songs.
Yeah.
And it was just it was out for a few days. And that song just hits me right here. Everything about it. That's a great storytelling, great redemption, great chase your dream song. Every bit as good as Thunder Road is a chase your dream song.
Yeah.
So I agree with what you're saying about Letter to You. It's, and it gets into ghosts and things like that. And that obviously resonates. He's the last man standing. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you. Yeah. And just a few years prior, he also did the Western Stars thing.
Right.
And he actually sang my very first favorite song before I knew Bruce. He sang on that album, Rhinestone Cowboy by Glenn Campbell.
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I did too. I didn't tell my family that when they were watching the film, and they did not know. And my wife just went crazy, right? Because we both went to high school in the 70s. So yeah, it's really good. Talk a little bit. You mentioned The Rising, and you mentioned you're joining the family business. And so talk about how, and I always ask, is there albums that have a special place in your heart? And I want to hear about that too. But specifically, as a firefighter and that rising, how does that speak to you? How does that, and you mentioned he puts himself in that going into the fire, right?
Yeah. And then actually, even the song on the album Into the Fire, I
Yeah.
had written, I wrote basically a screenplay based on that song.
Okay.
But the rising itself, and I remember actually telling my oldest brother, who's also a fireman, I said, he wrote this song for firemen. He goes, no, he didn't. They had this little brief point where they were annoyed because of the 41 Shots song or something.
Right.
I was like,
yeah.
First off, you guys didn't really listen to that song because he's not bad about the cops. He's saying what the hell's wrong with society in general. Anyway, that's a whole rant I could go on about that song, but I'm not going
to. And I will mention, right, that he talks about both sides, right? He talks about, is that a gun? Is that a knife? Wallet? This is your life. And praying over his vestibule, like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I agree. And just, I think obviously he's caring about us as a society and as his fans. But please go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah.
No, caring is a great word because I think that goes along with what I said earlier about there's just not many people that can write songs like he does to put himself like empathy.
Yeah.
Right. A really great artist, a really great writer, a great actor, great anybody has to have some sort of empathy for humans.
Yeah.
And he has that in spades. As far as the rising goes, he talks about basically rushing down to the fire on the wheels of fire with the cross of his calling, right? The Maltese cross. That's the cross of his calling.
Yeah.
And being a firefighter is that. It's a calling.
Yeah.
Not everybody can or will do it.
Yeah.
He talks about climbing those stairs with a 60-pound stone, which is our air, and a half-mile of line, going into darkness that you can't see. You don't really know where you're going. Like, that is just the epitome of what we do for a living.
Yeah.
Because you can't see shit.
Right.
And then there's those other songs on there. You're Missing. And he talks about coming into the house and there's the boots on the floor and they don't want to move the boots and things like that. Like that album, I think, came out at a time when America needed to hear it. I know that's kind of cliche in a way, but it's also true because the world had been at a standstill. Nobody really wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
They talked about it, but not not in that personal way, the way he did. At least not artistically. Nobody was talking about it the way he did in that personal, very personal way.
So I'll share a personal story from me. My brother-in-law, and like, I married Linda in 1984, and her sister Mary married Clayton in 1984. So we've been brother-in-laws almost 40 years, right? And he worked offshore, worked for Halliburton, and then became a paramedic, and then joined the fire department. And when he ended up retiring from the city of Allen as a firefighter. And he would always tell funny stories about having to go and they can't find where the noise is, and it's someone's thermometer, battery operated heat thermometer, that was making the noise, and telling stories about finding someone who's got low blood sugar, right? And they're going, and so you just thought Clay's a firefighter. Okay, yeah. Oh, funny stories, right? And my sister-in-law, his wife, would complain, why do you got to close down every lane but one lane? And he'd joke about, I'm not going to have some idiot hit one of my firefighters because you guys aren't paying attention. And then when 9/11 hit, it struck me and others like, holy shit, Clay does this. Clay is that role, and he just would never talk about it. And I think that's a common thing, right? It is just, that's the job. And so, yeah, I'm always impressed because, and I did spend a little time with him, like in Dallas, it's 24/48 out. And which is, you try to catnap, but if it's busy. And so, anyway, yeah, I'm glad you shared that story, and I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It
There's
is
a lot of good times too.
Yeah. Yeah.
We work.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell.
And there is that brotherhood of you sharing that's there. Let's talk about some of the other albums that mean a lot to you over the years. I agree with you, by the way. One of my favorite things is when I heard Dancing in the Dark going into Land of Hope and Dreams from the Broadway. I just, oh, that's amazing. And No Surrender and these, just the music. But you've talked about seeing live shows, but are there albums and songs that mean a lot to you? Especially, by the way, congratulate on your sobriety. I know I had colon cancer back in 2015, and I'm fine now, but there are songs that I listened to while I was taking chemo that will always have a special place in my heart.
Sure, absolutely. It's easier to pull songs, maybe. Going back to my brother went, and I can't even remember which album it was, but he came out, Terry's song.
Yeah.
Man.
Magic. Yeah.
The Magic album, that's right.
Yeah.
Which is another great album, by the way.
Absolutely.
Is anybody alive out there? Anything from Darkness, like, and even now, that one really speaks to me. And that's kind of No Sin to Be Glad You're Alive. And I'm not. I don't consider it a sin, and I might have used to. Spitting in the face of those Badlands and people trying to tear you down, but you're going to just keep fighting. Which I guess that's what he was doing with the manager back in those days, or however that story goes exactly. But that album really, that whole album really speaks to me. The storytelling of Born to Run, really, like I said, that hooked me early on. And there's a lot of songs. Every album has at least a small handful of songs that really touch me. Like I said, even if I were a priest, I was dying. I was hoping he was going to sing that in Dublin, but he didn't. The Human Touch, Lucky Town have a little bit of believe it or not, have a little bit of. I wasn't crazy of the fact that he had left the E Street Band for a little while,
right?
But there's some great music on those albums.
Yeah.
And I think they came out right around my birthday. I remember I cut the beginning part of school to go to the record store to go buy those two albums before I went to school.
Yeah.
And I think that goes all of this to say, even the earlier albums, Shuffle album and Greetings, all that, like, all have something. And that's what's just completely amazing about his body of work, that it's hard to pick any one particular album because everyone's got something. It's what I say when I go on my road trip. People will be like to me, and over the course of these few years, and I'm getting, I'm actually gearing up to go on one for this year where I'll touch all the northern states all the way across to Washington and back. Okay. But every single state has their own piece of magic. I tell that to everybody. But that's the same with every one of his albums. And that's what's amazing, is that from 1973 till now, that's a fact, that every one of them has some sort of magic. Even that little that fourth song where he does that acoustic version of Born to Run, where he says, nobody wins unless everybody wins.
Yeah.
Right? I have a shirt that has that quote. Like, everything has a place. It would be hard for me to choose one album because I think I could pull something from just about every one of them, if not every one of them.
Yeah, no, I get you.
I think as far as my personality goes, I would say Darkness is probably the one that really pumps me up.
Yeah. You've seen a lot of shows, and we always want to go to more, but are there songs you're still chasing besides If I Was the Priest? And by the way, I feel so privileged because he played it in Houston last year, and then he played it in Austin, and I was at both shows. And so I was like, I can't complain about, I got Priest twice. I need to just shut my mouth up and be grateful. Yeah.
I don't know that there's a song that, other than that one, at this point that I would say I chased. There's ones like I'm like, damn, I wouldn't mind hearing that, but then I might hear it the next time I see him. So
yeah,
I mean, he does it. That's what like even between two shows in Ireland, there was. I could look at the list. Like I said, I was taking notes and I have the set list. Like there was 5 or 6 differences just in those 2 days. And then there's always the standards you're gonna get. You're gonna get Born to Run no matter what, Thunder Road. And
right.
Over the course of the last probably decade for sure, Dancing in the Dark and but I don't know that there's one that I'm chasing. I guess I'm a living in the moment person, whatever happens.
Nothing wrong with that.
It's a good question, though, and I'm sure there's people out there. There's people out there that are probably I've never seen them play this, and I can't think of one particular song myself that I haven't seen him play that I really just love to see him play. Like there's certain ones that I love when I have seen it. Like I can listen to Bobby Jean live every single time.
Yeah.
That's another meaningful song. But he doesn't play it every single time. There's some like that, but I can't think of one particular one I've chased.
So
they got me thinking.
Yeah, I was at Louisville during I believe it was the River Tour, second River Tour, and they had finished, and the band was leaving off stage, and I actually saw Max give his drumsticks to someone, and all of a sudden Bruce picked up a guitar, and you could see everyone looking around, right? And they went into Bobby Jean, and it was I said it was like 4 o'clock on Christmas Day, and you found a present under the tree that everyone had overlooked, and it was a really good present, right? Not a pair of socks or anything, and because it was over, and all of a sudden you got that bonus song, and a great song, right? Was just like, oh man, this is so cool. This is so cool. So yeah, I'm right there with you. Yeah.
Like he pulled the in Ireland, just the 2 shows I saw, he closed out with covering the Pogues, which was, you want to talk about making those Irish people just, they were crying, they were ecstatic, and it was touching really and I like the song too, and I love the Pogues, but the fact that he gave those people that gift both nights, and you could see it in their faces. People were like, when I saw the Broadway show, that show ended, and I took myself there for my birthday that it was me and my sister who was on my right, and then there was this random guy from Germany who spoke little English, but he was he was on my left side, and when the Broadway show ended, and I like to think of myself as a pretty put together guy. I was emotional. That show, it's like he took me through my life. And I looked at the guy, and he looked at me, and he was just as emotional as I was. And we just we hugged. We embraced for a good seconds because we didn't even know what to say to one another. And that's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Just like all those people in Ireland with the Pogue song. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
Rainy Night in Soho.
Yeah. Gosh, this has been so much fun. Is there other stories like that where moments of friendship and finding each other that you want to share?
You always meet friends, especially at the Jersey shows.
Yeah.
There's a lot of long tailgating going on, and
Yeah.
bringing new people to shows has always been and I've gone to quite a, like, even in Ireland. I was on my own at those shows, and you just meet people along the way. Meeting yourself and meeting David from the film has been pretty cool.
Yeah.
I met a woman. She had the Spring Nuts T-shirt on in
Right.
Ireland, and she had these, and I actually really, so she had her two sons there. They were older boys, but they were both autistic. But they're
Okay.
both of their thing Springsteen. So she
Nice.
brings him to yeah, it was cool. And then I spoke with the boys, and like I said, they were older boys. They were probably in their 20s or something.
Yeah.
But they just, that was touching. That's a great story to me, to see that, or like the guy from Germany and hugging him. And I think one of the things that really for me is one of the gifts of seeing him live is feeling the people, right? It's hard to describe, but Bruce said many times that he wants the audience to feel like they're part of him and he's part of them. And I think he does that. And I think if you're in that audience and you're really paying attention to what's happening around you, I like to use the word mystical. It's something, because you
Yeah.
can see emotion, you can see joy, you can see when he does certain songs. There's certain songs will hit me different than it might hit the person next to me, but if he does, I've seen him do Blood Brothers or No Surrender, and my brother Kevin comes. That just thought that's a song I would like to see him do. Is Terry's song. I never saw him do that live, but that would also probably break me.
Yeah.
But the feel, to be able to feel your surroundings like that, and it's pretty awesome. And I've been also lucky that I've got to see him in so different places with different types of people in different venues. Broadway
Yeah.
is different than Giant Stadium,
Yeah.
which is different than the Ghost of Tom Joad tour when he's
Right.
solo acoustic in those intimate settings. But I think that's what one of the most magical things is feeling, is that the guy has that much energy to give that you actually feel it all around you and not just within yourself.
Yeah. And
It's a pretty remarkable talent.
I think also you're never alone at that. You're never alone at a Bruce show, right? Because there's someone, you guys are all have this in bond, you're together, right? You have this feeling of togetherness. And no matter, you know, you just and part of it, I agree with you. As much as I love the show, as much as I love sitting there in my seat, or because I'm old and can't do the pit, but and that lights go down and you hear the band, almost as much fun as before the show, and seeing people and sitting there talking to people. How many times have you seen them? Oh, this is your first time. Oh, anything you're wanting to hear. And just that sense of family, that sense of community is really strong at a Bruce show.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. It just actually brought something else up. It's actually a good story. So I did go to the shows in Ireland, but the Cork show was first, and a good friend of mine, he actually lives between New Jersey and Cork, right? So his wife lives in Cork, but he does a lot of business here, and so he's back and forth. So he was there, and he got tickets,
Okay.
and I met him, and at the Cork show, he had never seen Bruce. He just got the tickets, and because they were available by when he was there, when he was back in Cork,
Sure.
he didn't think much of it. So we both hung out in the pit together for the show, and watching him watched Bruce for the first time was really cool. What's up? What did you think? He goes, I'll tell you, man, that was really good. We said our goodbyes. I said, all right, Steve, I'll see you later. And he's enjoy Ireland. I said, don't worry, I will. And the day of the Dublin show was going to happen, I got a text from Steve. Hey, I'm coming up to Dublin. I got to see that guy again. And he brought his son. I was like, that's the magic of it. That's the magic of it.
I am so glad you said that, because that's just what I was going to say. I was going to say the magic of Bruce. One of my best friends has said this forever. He said, forget Disneyland. The happiest place on earth is a Bruce show. And I agree with him, right? Yeah, it's just there. I've had so much fun, Kyle. Thank you for joining me. And I really am looking forward to it. Listeners, Kyle's going to try to get some of his friends, maybe his brother, and we're going to do another round of kind of them telling and sharing stories. And I just can't wait to happen that. But before I get you out of here, I got to ask you the Mary question. So, for those of you who are maybe friends or family of Kyle, and this is your first episode of Set Listing Bruce, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Kyle made you proud. Jay Armstrong was an honors English teacher who is now retired, but when he was teaching, he would give his students the lyrics to Thunder Road, and they would read it as if it was a poem, going through the imagery and the choices that Bruce is discussing and using. And then he was asked his students at the end of class, does Mary get in the car? So Kyle, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
I'll preface this by saying I actually wrote a whole piece on the song Thunder Road, and Dave Barry loves it.
I'd love you to send me that.
I will. I'll send it to you. She absolutely gets in that car.
Okay.
I think she walks across that porch, and I think that Mary believes in the narrator, and she's, let's do this thing together. I'm going with that. I never was asked that question. I like it though.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. All right. If someone wants to reach you, Kyle, are you on any social media?
Yeah, I have my Twitter is Kyle T Hughes, Kyle T Hughes, Hughes. And my Instagram is _Kyle_Hughes.
Okay. So very nice. I will include that in the show notes. Any final thoughts, my friend?
It's a lot of fun. This was a lot of fun. And I look forward to coming back and seeing what we could do there. I got some characters.
Good.
If I can get them all around, it's like herding cats. But if I can get them, which I should be able to, we could have probably a lot of fun with them.
I think that is perfect. So I really appreciate your time. I love spending time with you. I can't wait to have you back on again with your buddies. For now, listeners, thank you so much for listening. Be sure and go follow Kyle. And for now, remember to be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.